There's nothing quite like the anticipation for a new Zelda game. I've seen it every time a new game is announced, but that anticipation has existed for much longer than I've been aware. Zelda 3 was teased for weeks, even months ahead of time in several of the popular early 90s gaming magazines. This long lead up was unusual, and it succeeded in rekindling interest in the series after almost 5 years of absence. It sold more copies than Zelda 2 on an underperforming console. That's impressive, and I'm very happy to tell you up front that this game still holds up beautifully today. In the beginning, there was darkness, and then there was a Triforce. With a dazzling animation and a mock orchestral score that could be used for a movie, the Triforce tumbles into position to lift the darkness and reveal the title. The full official title is The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, and you'll probably need an explanation for that cryptic name. How about a little prologue? The game has you covered there. There's very little animation in it, as it instead contains a text summary of events long ago. And now history is repeating itself. It's wordy, just like my reviews are sometimes, but there's a significant development. It's properly translated. Even if it isn't an exact translation from the original Japanese text, the English is all correct, which is a notable milestone. You can enter a name of your choice for Link, and why enter a normal name like Phil if you have enough space to turn it into something goofy like Filthy? We start at home with Filthy and his uncle on a stormy night, receiving a call for help from Princess Zelda in Hyrule Castle. Uncle says he's going out and you should stay home. Any good player would think to break the rules, although there's also a chest inside the house to check. It contains a lamp, so surely you have to go out in the dark. You can attempt to explore, but ultimately you can't stray too far yet, and Zelda will repeat her cry for help if you don't find your way into the castle. Under a bush, there's a secret passage with an injured uncle in it. Oh, that's your injured uncle. He didn't want you to get involved, but since you're already here, he gives his sword and shield to you. Now go rescue that princess. The passage only leads into the courtyard, so you'll have to enter through the front door with all the guards watching you. Luckily, you have a sword now if they get too close. The castle is crawling with guards, as it should be, although these aren't the normal occupants. It's entirely possible that someone evil is overthrowing the kingdom. Why would the princess be locked in the dungeon anyway? Don't get too confused by game terminology here. The game's first dungeon is actually a castle dungeon. It introduces the keys and locked doors, slightly overhauled from previous games, as well as concepts that are present throughout the game. Sometimes you have to defeat enemies to move on, since they may be carrying the key, or you may need to defeat all enemies in a room for a chest to appear. One of these chests contains a boomerang, which doesn't seem useful, but it can stun enemies for you to easily slash them. From games of this time, you would expect rescuing the princess to be the last thing you do. Here, it's the first thing, and she knows there's a hidden passage in the throne room to escape. Ew, it goes through the sewers, and your lamplight isn't very powerful. The passage should lead into the sanctuary, and Princess Zelda helpfully tells you to pull that switch over there. A bit of a troll, are we, Princess? There are 2 switches, and one of them releases several ropes, which are in fact snakes. The right switch is the one you want. If you can successfully get into the sanctuary, you've saved Princess Zelda, and that's where she'll hide. The loyal sage will protect her while you go on another quest. Like the prologue, he talks about the seal of the 7 wise men and a wizard who wants to break it, which would overwhelm the land with evil. He believes in you to defeat the evil wizard Aghanim. He also starts a trend of asking if you understood everything he said, and you can either say yes or not at all. You would think that he might rephrase a few things if you pick the latter option, but it's just a repeat button. More helpfully, he does have a chest next to him with a heart container, increasing your maximum health from 3 hearts to 4 before stepping out into the beautiful overworld. Anyone who enjoyed Zelda 1 will be blown away when they step out of the sanctuary. A brand new version of the classic overworld theme blasts out at you, and visually it's more colorful. I would love to hear how everyone felt when they experienced this for the first time. You have a lot to do now and several places you could go. You might as well take a sightseeing tour just to see what you can find. You have the misty lost woods near Kakariko Village, which is a good place to start. Lots of little items to get you started, most notably heart pieces. 4 heart pieces make 1 heart container, and with 24 scattered across the game, you'll eventually start thinking outside the box to look for them. If searching for items isn't your thing, you can just get to the point already, something I clearly have trouble with. There's another sage, Sahasrara, who seems skeptical of your abilities. To prove yourself this time, he wants you to retrieve the Pendant of Courage from the Eastern Palace. Typical game stuff there, and this is the first proper dungeon. It's also the point where the game really gets good. The dungeon design is my favorite part of the game because I love watching everything come together. The way you visit some of the rooms multiple times is very satisfying, and it's a vast improvement over the previous dungeons of the series. Every dungeon has a map and a compass to find, as well as the usual keys for locked doors. One element that adds to the dungeon design is the big key, one of which is found in each dungeon. Certain doors can only be opened with this special key, but most excitingly you can open the big chests. Locked chests are a new concept, and they contain items that are almost always necessary within the dungeon, or immediately in the overworld. In the Eastern Palace it's the bow, so now you can finally use all those arrows you've been picking up. You'll need them to reach the boss, and they're also the most effective way to take out that boss. And funnily enough, that's how you get the pendant, as well as another heart container. Shalarsh now believes that you are the chosen one, and rewards you with the Pegasus boots for you to dash around the world with. He thinks you could be worthy of the Master Sword, and you'll have to get the other 2 pendants for that. Their dungeons are now marked on your world map. There's also a throwaway line here, where he tells you to get an important item in the southwest. He's right, it is important, but it makes no sense to get this now. In fact, hiding it at this location is so random that I suspect the developers forgot to include the item. This is just a random ice cave that holds the ice rod, which you won't need until right at the end, and this little quest is far from the pendants. I promptly forgot that I had the ice rod, but it's a magic item that is limited by your magic meter like a few other items. Your next main quests are at opposite corners of the map, and the game does very well to make you visit everything. We have the Desert Palace and the Tower of Hera to get through. These dungeons continue to have brilliant design, but before you can get to the Tower of Hera, you'll be introduced to quite possibly the coolest thing in the world. The journey to the tower takes you up a mountain, but also into another world. The game's main gimmick will eventually be traveling between those 2 worlds, and if it sounds rough, let me assure you that this remains one of the best gimmicks ever made in a Zelda game. For now, you only catch a glimpse of this world, formerly known as the Golden Land, and you're also stuck as a bunny. Until you get the Moon Pearl and the Tower of Hera, you can't keep your form in the alternate dimension. Just a glimpse of that for now though. When you have the pendants of courage, wisdom, and power, you have all the ingredients in the Master Sword recipe. Well, it's not that simple. You have to find the sword's resting place in the Lost Woods, which also has some fake swords scattered around. Thankfully, the Lost Woods aren't a maze of garbage this time. I stopped myself from talking about the music so that I don't ramble on, but the music is perfect for the mist covering the woods. That leading into the Master Sword fanfare is perfect. You're a master now, and the mist is clearing for you. Now go stop that wizard. He will give you extra motivation by capturing Zelda again. The sanctuary wasn't so safe after all. Aghanim has a tower on top of Hyrule Castle, blocked off by a magic barrier. Luckily, the Master Sword can disable it, and you can enter the gauntlet. It's a tall tower, and the design is linear and therefore not as interesting as the other dungeons, but its purpose is to put all your skills to the test. It contains some stronger enemies and several dark rooms for you to prove yourself in. However, the magic sword comes with a bonus if you have full health. As with Zelda 1 and 2, full health means magic sword beam. Slash the sword to send an extra projectile forward, but it will only deal a fraction of damage. In the tower, this trivializes the gameplay since you can keep your distance from the enemies. Admittedly, this is more boring than close-range strategic attacks, but soon enough, it's not easy to stay away from enemies. As soon as you take damage, you lose your magic advantage. Many floors later, you finally meet Aghanim, who puts on a spectacular show by making Zelda disappear in front of your eyes. Alright, we're dealing with a real villain here. It proceeds into a battle, and it's not challenging, so this can't be the end. The glistening blue blade of the Master Sword fights off his magic projectiles like a tennis ball, except Aghanim always misses the return shot and keeps taking damage. Eventually, he'll surrender the fight, but use the last of his strength to banish you to the Dark World. It's lucky that Salasharlin is able to telepathically communicate with you to tell you what's going on, because it could take a while to figure out otherwise. You are now standing on top of the Pyramid of the Golden Land, which has been twisted for evil and is referred to as the Dark World. It's a copy of the Light World, with this pyramid replacing Hyrule Castle and other objects and buildings shifted around slightly. Without retrieving the Moon Pearl from the Tower of Hera, you'd be stuck as a bunny right now, but once equipped with it, you are instead a fully functional Link. Now go explore the coolest thing in the world. I don't give out compliments that easily, and for something to earn that title, it has to do more than just look cool. It has to actually work well. Needless to say, it does. It ties the whole game together, and the way the two dimensions flow together is flawless. At this point, you already have the magic mirror, which allows you to leave the Dark World, and to return, it leaves a warp point behind in the place the mirror was used. The Light World also has various portals, which can only be uncovered after collecting items in the Dark World. There are clever instances of this required to beat the game from here, and countless extra things to do with it if you're a completionist going for all the items. The Dark World tasks you with 7 dungeons, one for each of the maidens captured by Aghanim to break the seal of the Wise Men. Yeah, the plot exists. It's fully developed, I think. Like I mentioned, this is a well-translated game, but it's very wordy. When I was a kid playing games, I wanted to play my action games, not read text in them, so I would just skip through. Even now as an adult, barely qualified or not, the text in this game is boring and I didn't always take time to understand it. Whenever I cleared a Dark World dungeon, it was a very triumphant feeling, subsequently brought down by sitting through the rescued maiden's meaningless speech. Okay, that's being too harsh. This text stuff is only a minor flaw. What I can blame the text for is not being important enough. We have a couple of mandatory items to collect by taking advantage of both dimensions, and they're easy to miss. Overall, the direction between dungeons is fine. They're well marked on your map. The items are the problem directions-wise, and I can't give the game a pass on this one. The ice rod earlier was totally out of place, but at least it had instructions. Items like the Quake Medallion, or the magic flute which looks suspiciously like an ocarina, didn't get the same treatment. I'm impressed that I got this deep into a script before dissecting flaws in this way, and if you've watched any of my other reviews, you should know that this game is the real deal. Honestly, we're almost out of flaws. I'm not going to take you through all the dungeons simply because I don't want to edit a long video, but let's have a lightning round just for fun. Palace of Darkness is the first dungeon you visit in the Dark World, and it's a huge step up in complexity while still keeping an appropriate difficulty level. Swamp Palace integrates the light and dark world just to enter, and it keeps that concept going with the water levels inside. I hope you already got Sora's flippers though. Skull Woods is the Dark World version of the Lost Woods, containing a dungeon with multiple entrances. Mothula, the boss, can be banished to the Dark World for all I care. Gargoyle's domain sits in the middle of Thieves Town, the counterpart for Kakariko Village. This dungeon isn't gimmick heavy, it's just a showcase of good design. Ice Palace is feared and even hated by many for its slippery physics and perplexing puzzle. I loved the solution, though it would be nice if it were shorter. This is the first time that the big chest can be skipped. It contains the Blue Mail armor upgrade, which is very nice to have, but not necessary. Misery Mire is extensive and still very satisfying to watch everything come together. The Cane of Samaria found from the big chest is an extremely weird item. Turtle Rock breaks my brain, and yet if you truly look everywhere, a guide isn't necessary. No unfair tricks used, just hard puzzle solving and strong enemies. Princess Zelda is the maiden kept in this dungeon. If you can clear all of these dungeons, you should feel very accomplished. I wouldn't call this a difficult trial, but it certainly isn't easy. You've now rescued the 7 maidens, and now all that's left is to stop that evil wizard. Have you collected all the items you want to collect before going to the end? There are hidden quests that can upgrade your sword 2 more times past the Master Sword, and extra hearts never hurt. Aghanim corrupted the Golden Land to turn it into the Dark World, and he somewhat corrupted himself. You see, Aghanim is just the alter ego of Ganon, a villain players recognize from the first games. The 7 maidens work together to break the magic seal into Ganon's tower, the final dungeon. It has a classic design of revisiting challenges in old dungeons, particularly from the Light World, while also mixing in brand new ones. You also face the Light World bosses all over again, granted they go by much quicker now that you're more powerful. I'm disappointed that this uses the same theme as all the other Dark World dungeons though, and while the tune is fine, it was getting repetitive before this point. However, I'm not going to leave the music with a negative comment. The whole soundtrack is worth listening to. My favorite theme is the Outside Dark World theme, which I know is a generic choice, but it's hard to argue with. The wizard known as Aghanim is waiting at the top of the tower, and you battle him again too, meaning that you truly refight all the bosses from the Light World in this one tower. His battle is changed up with cloned images of himself to make matters very confusing. This time when weakened, he transforms into a bat and crashes through the top of the pyramid where you first entered this realm. What in the Count Dracula was that? The only thing left to do is follow him in and fight. Thankfully, you're allowed to go anywhere else before this, so you can collect any remaining items or just potions to help you in your battle. The maximum upgrades are 20 hearts, the golden sword, red mail, and importantly silver arrows. Even with this, you're going to struggle against the diabolical pig man. His true form has been revealed, and his battle goes through a few different phases that test your skills in new ways. He just wanted to get one room over from this arena to touch the Triforce. Too bad, you're going to beat this game, so Link is getting there first. Essentially, the Triforce can grant wishes like a genie, and Link uses it to restore the Dark World back to the Golden Land and repair all damages caused by Ganon. It was an action-packed adventure, and it's very deserving of the long ending sequence. The epilogue shows all the side characters you met along the way, and even some you may never have bumped into. And there's another long credit sequence to follow. I hope the developers were as satisfied to make this ending as I was to reach it. This is hands down some of the best action you can find on the Super Nintendo, and for me, the point that gaming standards truly flew higher than on previous consoles. One of the best overworlds to explore with endless goodies to collect or skip, and some of the best designed dungeons with great natural progression. The only real issue I run into is with the cryptic clues sometimes. Like Zelda 1 and 2, it's still possible to get lost. But really, what's an adventure without a wrong turn? Overall, this game capitalizes on all of its strengths to give players a near-perfect game, and it's already over 30 years old. Therefore, my final score for The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past will be 9.1 out of 10. I'm willing to admit that not everyone will enjoy this game as much as I did. However, if you have ever enjoyed a 2D top-down adventure game, this is a must-play. Don't let its age fool you. This is perhaps the first game I've reviewed that I can truly consider timeless. I'm a little surprised that Nintendo has never remade it in recent years, but I'm also thankful for that. There are very few changes that I would be happy about. There's one remake from 2002 on the GBA which features the side game The Legend of Zelda: Four Swords. Both versions can be played with Nintendo Switch Online, and there are several other options to find the original SNES version nowadays too. Upon release, Nintendo Power awarded A Link to the Past with one of the highest scores they've ever given. 18.7 out of 20. I haven't seen anything hit 18 yet. As expected, it was also on the front cover of this issue. Electronic Gaming Monthly featured a full-page preview for Zelda 3 before the SNES even came out in the US, and 7 months later finally reviewed it with an average of 8.75 out of 10. The harshest critic of this group was disappointed with a lack of radical gameplay changes. Meanwhile, in Japan, the game was released on the 1-year anniversary of the console, and what a celebration it was. Famitsu's review panel thought so too, giving it an unbelievable average score of 9.75 out of 10. Tell me, did you agree with the points I've made? What rating would you give The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past for the SNES, initially released in 1991? Leave a like to stop me from falling into the dark world, and subscribe to keep Ganon sealed away. As ever, thank you for watching, and please continue to be your own unique self. I'm gonna cook out with my book out.